Welcome to the Consummate Athlete Podcast, where we explore what it means to be a well-rounded, happy, goal-crushing athlete. Every week, myself, sports journalist Molly Hurford, and cycling coach and kinesiologist Peter Glassford interview experts and chat through all of your training questions. We're excited to have you along for the ride. Hello. Welcome back to the Consummate Athlete Podcast. Peter, how's it going?
It's going excellent. I'm not going to say someone's birthday's coming up, but it is. And
his birthday is coming up. Happy birthday, honey.
Yeah, we won't say when, but it is that time of year. We hope your holidays continue to go well. And when we are back with our part 2 of this goal-setting mental toughness mini series we've put together here, Molly's put together. So last week we had a great episode with Erin, and she took us through sort of a sports psychologist's view on mental toughness and goal setting. And now we have Dr. Scott Frey is back. He was a very popular guest this past year. He is a neuroscientist, I believe. Yes. And so he takes a little different slant on the same thing, and so we thought we'd have him back because it was popular, and I know it resonated with a lot of our listeners, and we were going to have him back to talk about this very specific concept of mental toughness and then a little bit of goal setting because it is the season for goal setting.
Exactly, yeah. I really like these episodes being back-to-back because I think it's interesting that they end up coming to the same conclusions, really saying the same things, but in different ways. So I think it speaks to different people. I know there are some people who find the sports psychology stuff just to be, a little too touchy-feely isn't really the right word, but I think people have that impression of anything when you talk about therapy or working with a therapist or a psychologist or anything. I think there are people that shy away from it, but those people can sometimes hear from a neuroscientist who's talking about, no, this is how your brain chemistry is doing these things. And this is exactly what's physically happening in your brain. I think that can just, saying things in different ways can speak to different types of people.
Well, and I think the reality is I was joking with you last week about your vomiting and sprinting away from it and thinking that maybe that was mental toughness. You were down, not doing well. And you said that it was actually that you wanted to try and eke out a little bit more performance because you had missed your goals or a couple of goals. You didn't miss all your goals, but you missed a couple of goals, the like stretch goals you missed by fractions of a second. And you thought maybe there was a little bit more grit or mental toughness that could come, whether that's the day-to-day or actually in the performance.
Yeah, exactly. And a lot of that actually does come down to goal setting as well. And again, Scott and I talk about that in this interview. One of the interesting things is the more I was digging into this with Scott and with Erin, the more I realized that some of what I'm talking about, some of my like complaining about missing the record by a very, very tiny margin is a bit of revisionist history, especially for the 100-miler where I wasn't necessarily going for, like, the record wasn't really the goal. You live with me. Did I ever say that I wanted to get the record?
Well, we had it written down.
We had it written down as a pacing strategy, but I don't think I ever said I thought I could get it or would get it. I mean, prior to that, my fastest 100-mile time was 23 hours and 56 minutes. I beat that time by over 6 hours. Right? Like,
well, and the athlete who had it is Amanda
Nelson. Yeah. Is a professional.
Is a great runner. Right. And so, yeah, you get this sort of like starstruck, but then you don't know the situation that she took it on under either. Right. Whether it was her greatest day or whether the conditions were slower or maybe you are also a very good runner.
Yeah. So I think it was an interesting, both Erin and Scott kind of nudged me on that a little bit to say, hey, was that actually a goal? Or is that just like after the fact you looked at it and you're like, oh, darn, I missed it by so little. Like, how did I not go for it? Well, you weren't really going for it at any point during the race. It's more just after the fact.
Yeah, this is sort of like a complete before you compete and you were still like on the complete goal, whether that was appropriate or not. I mean, you hadn't done the thing before, that race before.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean, I completed my A goal of winning it. So it was sort of
they sort of
adding another goal on top of the, so it was an interesting thing. And I hopefully other people find it interesting and have similar experiences and maybe can use some of this in their goal setting for next year. And thinking about that. And if you are trying to figure out how to set your goals for next year and you're just coming up completely short, don't forget we do have phone consults with Peter to kind of talk through your season.
Yeah, and we use this could be like movement based, if you want to work through something strength training oriented or something like that, customizing something as well, or sometimes it's we're overcoming an injury, or you've plateaued is often something I'll see in intake forms. I feel like I've plateaued, or I don't know what my threshold is. That it's really any question you have. It's rather than going down to the deep dark corners of the internet, we can talk through for you what some of these concepts might mean. And this could include something like a goal setting or something like this as well.
Exactly. All right. I think we should get into it. And we will include links to the article that I was working on during this interview, a bunch of stuff for Scott, and of course, links to if you are interested in booking a phone consult. All right. With that, enjoy this conversation with Dr. Scott Frey. Scott, welcome back to the Consummate Athlete Podcast. I got to tell you, you were probably one of the most requested return guests that we've had. So welcome back.
Wow, that's very flattering, Molly. It's great to come back, and I'm glad people enjoyed our last chat. So wonderful.
Yeah, I think people really appreciated kind of seeing or hearing from you about the actual, not science behind sports. We know sports a science, but the physical science behind how our brains work, I think helps athletes especially really contextualize the quote unquote softer side of our athletic journeys. So give everyone anyone who, needs a refresher on who you are or who maybe missed that first episode, give them the quick rundown of who you are and what you do.
Yeah. So Scott Frey, a lot of people want to call me Scott Frey. I respond to that as well. For the past 30 plus years, I was a professor, and my area of specialization initially was experimental psychology, trying to understand how we perceive the world and use those perceptions to control our actions. And then early in my career, there was this burst of new technology to actually look at those questions, but specifically what's going on in our brains when we have a perception, when we experience a thought or an emotion, when we plan an action. And in parallel with studying those things in running a lab, university-based lab, I was always a keen endurance athlete since my teenage years. And I wanted to put those two things together, and those two things kind of now merge in my third chapter of my career, I guess, which is working with athletes on the brain and mental side of performance through my little one-man company, Cerebral Performance.
Love it. Love it. Okay. Before we get into, I know we're coming up on New Year, New You. So I do want to talk to you about goal setting, because I know that's something you and I have talked about in the past. It's something our audience always loves chatting about. But I'm going to start with the topic that I'm primarily concerned with for myself lately, which is this idea of mental toughness. So I emailed you and said, I'm working on this personal essay article where it turns out I'm actually kind of a cream puff. I might run 100-milers. I might do these seemingly intense endurance things, but I think secretly deep down, I'm actually not nearly as mentally tough, mentally strong, whatever we want to call it, as you might think by my results. And you said, I've got some thoughts on mental toughness. So let's maybe start with how do you see mental toughness? When I sent you that question, what was your first response?
Well, my first response to what you just said is it's a lot of rubbish, because anyone who can run 100-mile races and do all the other things that you do is definitely mentally tough in my book. So let's just get that right out of the way. You're being very Canadian.
Sorry about that.
No, it's generally a good thing, but I want to correct the record, Ollie. You're very mentally tough. So
appreciate that.
Yeah, so I think a lot about this because I primarily work with endurance athletes. The nature of these sports are that they require really digging deep and finding out things about ourselves that we might not have realized, finding those inner strengths that can get us through those tough moments. And I think that at its best, these sports are ways of exploring that then carry benefits in terms of how we think about ourselves and transcend the world of sport into the rest of our lives, into how we do relationships and how we do work and so on. So I love this topic of mental strength or mental toughness. But I think I view it a little differently maybe than a lot of people do. And so I want to try this idea on with you and your audience. So I'm gonna nerd out for a second here,
I
if you
love it.
don't mind.
I love it. We love a nerd out.
So we are, from my perspective as a brain scientist, we are literally our brains. Right now, my brain is talking to you, your brain is talking to me. And our brains kind of sit inside of our heads, our skulls, and they don't really have any connection to the outside world. They're floating around in this kind of cerebral spinal fluid. It's in this dark sarcophagus of our brains, or of our skulls, if you want to think about that, right?
Ooh, that is not an image that I want when I'm like in the middle of a run, but I
Yeah.
see where you're going.
Yeah, I apologize if that causes some people trauma to think about it, but it's kind of a weird thought, right? And what the brain is doing is it's taking in information from the outside world through our senses, through our vision, our touch, our sense of where we are in space, proprioception, our hearing, and so forth. And it's using that information to try and make sense of the world that involves also drawing on past experiences, on memories. It also is involved with our emotions, right? How do those thoughts how do those perceptions spark emotional experiences and so forth? And all of those things are coming together to kind of create our experience of reality. How are you feeling right now? And I think that's at the core of this issue for mental toughness. And let me tell you why. That those perceptions can fluctuate and vacillate very quickly. So we can be sitting here having this conversation and everything's going perfectly pleasantly, and something could happen. You could say something that triggers a wave of unpleasant emotions for me, or I could do the same for you. And now everything is completely different. Our perception of what's going on can change much quicker than what's actually happening around us in the world a lot of the time. And in the context of the races that we and your audience tend to gravitate toward, we all know that the deeper into those races you get, you can be feeling fine one moment and absolutely at death's door the next. And it can be very hard not to buy into those perceptions. It can be very hard not to realize that this is very temporary and that I'm going to move through this. And it's kind of this wave we're riding of up and down. And what I think mental toughness is the ability to ride that wave, to not buy into those perceptions when they're super good or super low, but to realize that our perceptions are not always an accurate copy of reality. To not take the bait when you start feeling that like deep sense of sort of hopeless despondence and like I'm on the limit, I can't possibly squeak out anymore from myself. But just to realize that for what it is, it's a temporary perception. It's a temporary stirring up of thoughts and emotions, with the emphasis on temporary. It's going to change. It's going to turn around. And I think truly mentally tough people in the context of what we're talking about are the people who are able to step back and see it for what it is, that it's a theater that your mind is creating, and that the reality is not necessarily exactly in alignment with that. And by being able to take that bigger perspective and step back, that gives you the ability to move through those tough patches. And to me, that is the crux of mental toughness. Mm-hmm. Being able to not latch on to the vacillations of our mind during a tough training session or a tough competition, but to be able to step back and realize that those bad feelings will pass, that we will go up and down, and we don't have to kind of buy too much into any of them and start going down the rabbit hole of catastrophizing and so on.
Oh, I really like that because I think so. I really kind of started coming to this thesis about myself when I was doing that. I was doing a fastest known time attempt and I missed it by 2 minutes. Um, the less we say about that, the better.
Okay. See, that could be one of those things. And now we go down that avenue and we're having our nice conversation. And now what happens, right? It's like if you start letting that thought take over, right? You buy into that trip, the world is now taken on a cloudy, gray kind of context for you in that moment. And it's flipping like that all the time.
Yeah, well, so during that, because it was just me out there, it was really the first time that I wasn't in a race setting doing something that long. So I actually was very much like, and I couldn't have music on because I was navigating. So I was so in my own head for that entire time that I got very much I was hearing my thoughts a lot more than I do in races where there's people around, you're kind of waving, you're saying hi to the aid station people. Like I can usually put myself into a better mood in those cases because I'm like a good job kind of runner. Uh, Out there alone though, oh my God, I am so mean. As it turns out, I'm so mean to myself. And I was like picking up on it because, I write about this stuff a lot. And I'm literally was working on a middle grade novel with an author about self-compassion and all of this. So I'm fully aware of it in my like, rational brain, but the back of my brain is just like chirping away, like just mean. And I ended up coming up with the mantra of, do you suck or are you just going uphill? And most of the time, I was in fact just going uphill.
I love that. I think that's great. And this is the dilemma, right? So if we go back to this idea that you are your brain and your brain is generating all these kind of perceptions and thoughts, right? From the information it's taking in and your past experiences and your emotions and all those associations, it is kind of a theater, right? And if you step into a situation like you're describing, where you're really immersed in that theater, right? It's like the IMAX of your life. You're alone with your thoughts. Um, you'll start to see how crazy it can get in there. And when we're pushed physically, the brain's job is to keep us safe. And one of the ways the brain keeps us safe in a situation where we're really exerting ourselves, because it doesn't know, Molly, that the end of the FKT is in an hour or in a day, right? It doesn't know. So it's like, if you keep doing this for another day, things are going to get really bad. I've got to do something here. And one of the ways the brain puts on the brakes is starts throwing up all this kind of negative chatter in our heads, this kind of wild ruminations, right? Where it's like finding your way out of that labyrinth using a device like you did, right? Do I suck or is it just the hills, right? Um, Having some kind of a little device like that, no matter how simple it might be, is a way of getting out of this. So there is something in that we discovered, my field discovered probably 30 years ago at this point. And it's like, what happens when we're just literally left with our own thoughts? So we used to put people in the MRI machine and we'd image their brains and look at what they're doing when, they're having an emotion or retrieving a memory or imagining, running or whatever. But there are also these times we could put people in and just leave them alone and just say, you're just going to lie there quietly. That's all we want you to do. Don't fall asleep. And when you're in that kind of a state, just alone with your thoughts, mind wandering, there's a network of areas along the midline of your brain that become very active. We call it the default mode network. And it turns out those are the mechanisms that are responsible for all of that internal dialogue, the internal rumination, right? So when you're in a difficult situation and the brain wants to rein in your behavior a little bit, one of the ways it does it is it just dials up the volume on that internal rumination. And that can really take you down some dark paths. And it can, for those of us who are interested in performance, right? You're going after your FKT, it can totally make or break you. So you got to find your way out of that. And finding your way out of that is a characteristic of a mentally tough person. That's how I think of it. So
Mm-hmm.
what you did, further evidence, Molly, that you're mentally tough.
Medium. We'll say I'm like slowly becoming convinced here. Although, okay, here's the like fly in the ointment I'm gonna throw at you as far as my like mental toughness is concerned. You could not pay me to run a marathon because I think it's too hard. Like I like the long stuff because it's like, and I'm using air quotes here, obviously. Like it's easy for me. And it genuinely is. The idea of doing 100 miles sounds way more pleasant than trying to do a like sub 3 marathon, something like that. So I do actually, I will say, like, yes, it sounds like, oh yeah, 100 miles, like hard, whatever. I actually don't think it is.
Interesting. So this brings up a very interesting topic to me. So I'm going to preface this by saying I've never run a race over 50 kilometers. So my ultra friends look at me and think that's silly. That's like the marathon with a cool down.
Oh, see, here's the problem with your ultra friends, though, is like the limit does not exist, right? Like you do 100 and someone's like, oh, but have you done Big's backyard and like
Right,
gone for
right.
36 hours?
Or
Oh,
Cocodona or
200?
whatever.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Now my 200 friends are all like, oh, but I haven't done a 250.
The Barkley,
Yeah.
the 6 day, yeah. But I have run some sub 3 marathons, and you're right, they're pretty hard. Um, they're hard in a different way. And I have done some long trail runs and some very long bike rides. There's different kinds of hard, right? There's hard that feels like I'm going to lean on a swimmer friend of mine who shared this analogy, but it's like those long efforts are hard in the sense of like someone just kind of pulling your hair a little for hours, right? Whereas running a fast 10K or 5K is like getting punched in the face.
Exactly. I
It's
don't want to
really
get
different.
punched in the face.
Yeah.
I
So
have
I
enough
will
dental
have,
problems.
yeah, who needs it, right? Um, I have the ultra runners I work with often do some of these. They think I'm a little crazy, but I'll have them go out and run the local 5K turkey trot. I will
That's what I
have
was
them go
afraid
out
you
and,
were going to say. Darn it.
yeah, you got to get out there, Molly. It's perfect time of the year. Run the 10K, feel that steering intensity, feel that perceived exertion of like 9.5 out of 10 and I think there's real value there for recalibrating our sense of perceived exertion. So I'll give an example. I was working with an ultra runner and he was doing some different efforts. And I said, well, what's your perceived exertion? He says, it's got to be an 8. I said, okay. And then we had him do, the local 10K or something. He's like, nope, that was a 6. And now I know what an 8 really is and what a 9 really is and so on. So I think these are ways of building a little bit of resilience and resistance to these kind of extreme efforts. But so I think people who are doing ultra things shouldn't overlook the value. And I'm not talking about the training effect in the normal way we would talk about it, metabolic systems, adaptations neuromuscularly. I'm talking about the ability to handle a lot of discomfort when you're at that kind of threshold pace that you can only sustain for an hour tops, or maybe even less.
Hmm.
There's real value there psychologically in resetting the scale a little bit. Um,
Yeah,
and
very,
that
very cool.
contributes to your resilience and toughness, right? It's a different kind of discomfort.
Hmm. Yeah. So I guess, that's an example of a great way to work on or anyone work on their mental toughness is sort of doing, I guess, like flip side, I guess, for someone who's more of like the 5K person, for them, would it actually be more of like doing long, slow distance? So is it actually like a kind of do the inverse of what thing you gravitate towards to work on our mental toughness as far as like the
Well,
physical thing?
yeah, that's really interesting. I think that's, I haven't done the reverse. I just haven't had an athlete in that situation, but I think there is real value likely. I mean, I was kind of that athlete at different times in my running career where going out and doing some really long trail runs, even though I was racing half marathons or
Hmm.
something,
Because
had a
that
lot of
forces you to
benefits.
get, yeah, like that would kind of, it'd be a different kind of stimulus, right? Like that would be way more just your brain starting to chirp at you even more because you're out there for longer. Um,
Yeah, I think there could be value to that. In addition to the value that we know about in terms of what a coach might talk about or an exercise physiologist. And I think one of the messages here is that you're intentionally attending to the need to train the brain side of things as well.
mhm.
And so, just a quick thought, we touched on perceived exertion for a minute and how different kinds of race efforts at different kinds of intensities have their own unique signatures when it comes to perceived exertion. One thing we do know about perceived exertion is it's intimately tied with motivation. So
Mm.
it's a two-way kind of street, but basically we can think about it as this. When your perceived exertion goes up, you start, and this is largely subconscious, right? Not in your immediate awareness necessarily, but the brain is doing a calculus, and the calculus is a risk benefit analysis basically. And the risk benefit analysis, we can verbalize it as being sort of, um, what's the payoff for me continuing to push this hard?
Mhm.
Okay. And when that payoff doesn't when we start to have a higher perceived exertion, we start to devalue the perceived payoff, right? It becomes less valuable to us, and the cost of the effort gets inflated. And so people have studied this. They've studied in a little niche field called neuroeconomics, and this is like this idea that our motivation is largely determined by this kind of calculus of the perceived benefits of continuing to do something versus the reward versus the cost. It's a cost
Mhm.
benefit analysis, and we know something about the areas of the brain that are kind of doing that sort of thing. But the key for an athlete is that perceived exertion, how hard we perceive we're working, really plays into that. And so we need to think about ways to keep that perceived exertion well calibrated and well
Mhm.
dialed in, because that, getting to our topic, right, that is going to underpin um, that mental toughness.
Ooh, I like that. Now, I guess like the question here is how? How do we do that? I also want to like quickly like maybe even like put a little asterisk here that something I've been thinking about lately is that the mental toughness is not necessarily a performance indicator. And I think we tend to actually like equate it in a way that does like it's a false equivocation, right? Like the person who wins the race is is mentally tough. I'm actually going to argue that like I think the people that are finishing 5 hours behind me are
Oh,
way freaking tougher than I am. Like they are so much more mentally tough because they are doing it for so much longer
yeah.
and like to be totally like blunt about it, like they're not going for the win, right? Like they have to keep that like personal satisfaction side of it alive and well the entire time. Whereas like at least I can run like someone's chasing me because they are, and that like the win is on the line. So I actually have like more external motivation to do well. So I think the coolest thing about the mental toughness piece is that actually like this is so applicable to the people who aren't at the front of the race, and if anything, they actually can be like so much more mentally tough.
Oh yeah, no doubt about it. You watch watch a big marathon, and just look at the people who are finishing in 4+ hours or 4.5, 5 hours even. It's like they're really digging deep in a way that is very much like how deep the people at the front are digging. But like you said, that reward cost reward kind of analysis has to be really different. Now the reward has to be entirely internal. And one of the this brings up an interesting topic of like what motivates people, right? We talk a lot about sometimes, setting goals that are process goals as opposed to setting results-based goals. And some athletes really need results-based goals. So I think it's not an either or, but often both. And results-based goals can be highly motivating. And some athletes really thrive on that. There are, top athletes that are really motivated by results-based goals, and there are back-of-the-pack athletes who are really motivated by results-based goals. Breaking that 4-hour barrier in the marathon is a big deal. But it has to always not be the be-all and end-all for why someone's doing the thing, because results come and results go, and they go up and down, just like those vacillations of our thoughts, right? So when you get in those bad patches and it feels like you're not going to make your results goal, what do you have to fall back on? Right? That intrinsic motivation can always be there for you if it's grounded in this kind of process, right?
Yeah. Ooh, I love it. Okay. Now kind of coming back to, so we're saying like everyone can, this is for everyone. This isn't just for the front of the pack. In fact, if anything, it's more relevant the further back you are, the longer you're out there, frankly.
On your feet. Yeah.
Yeah. Time on feet, real thing here. So this is kind of a weird question, but how can an athlete know that they need to work on their mental performance? Because I think this is actually like, this was the crux of like this essay for me. Like, this is actually the question or like issue I'm grappling with is like, I've always considered myself like, oh, I'm mental performance side. Like, I've got that dialed, like no problem there, whatever. And I think like where I'm at right now is realizing like, oh, no, I might actually have some like gains to make here that like I'm not making like my intervals are like pretty tapped out, but like maybe over here we can actually do something. So.
Yeah, no, I think it's a great question. And so I can't remember if I talked about this in our earlier episode or not. Hopefully it's not too redundant, but I like to think of it like there's this physical limit. There's a physiological capacity that we're all walking around with. And we can thank our parents for that. It's got a big genetic component, and we don't know where it is. We know it's up here somewhere, could be down here, could be up there. We don't know. The really key thing here is how much of that physical capacity we can utilize on any given day. And that's going to be a function of a lot of things. It's going to be a function of how well trained you are, right? Have you been doing a structured training program, maybe working with a coach who knows how to leverage adaptations and by having the right kinds of mix of recovery and stress and so forth to get the most out of you physically. But if you're not doing some kind of work, structured work to develop your ability to, I would say, be mentally tough in the ways we've been talking about, right? To ride out those vacillations of the ups and downs and in your training and in your performance. And those happen on the minute-to-minute time scales, but they also happen on the day-to-day and week-to-week and month-to-month time scales. Because as you know from having, like me, a substantial athletic career, it's not a linear process to improvement. It's going to go up and down and up and down. And if you're too wedded to the results bit of it, it's very hard to weather those storms when you're not going forward and you're going backward, right? That's all part of this mental toughness thing. Mm-hmm. So I think that, I'm sorry, completely lost where I was going with that.
How can an athlete know they need to work on their mental performance?
Well,
like, I see where you're going here.
But... Thank you. Thank you for a little getting back on track. The 60-year-old brain, if you're finding that you're getting swept up and having trouble moving through those difficult patches, whether it's the moment-to-moment races when you're, or moment-to-moment fluctuations when you're maybe out there doing some intervals, right? And pushing harder than you normally do, maybe even harder than you will in your race to get training adaptations. You're having struggles with that. I would first think about that as maybe a sign that you're struggling with mental toughness. If you're having difficulty getting through those times where things aren't going well with your training or aren't going well with your racing, right? Then that's a sign to me that we could be working on this, what I call the functional capacity, that ceiling that goes up and down, right? It's never going to go above your physical capacity. It's always going to be somewhere below that, but how close you can get is a function of how far your brain is going to allow you to go in toward that capacity before it starts really throwing on the brakes.
Mm-hmm.
That's what the mental sort of stuff can do. And I'm a believer that we definitely get stronger mentally by doing hard things, but that there's more that we can be doing that is of a structured nature to cultivate things like mental toughness, as opposed to just saying, well, if I just run more and run harder or do more intervals on my bike, it'll just be a byproduct of that. To some extent, that's true. But I think we could do better than that as well by having some dedicated ways to approach it.
Okay. So let's maybe talk about a couple of those ways. I know obviously you work with athletes on this. So, what does this look like?
Yeah. So let's start with one that I feel like we danced around it a little bit already, because when I'm talking to you about like being able to see your thoughts coming and going without like latching onto them or buying into them, that's a lot of the language that people would use to describe a practice of mindfulness, right? Where you're watching the thoughts go by and seeing them and saying, oh, there's that negative thought again, right? There's that thought that I really suck at this running thing. But instead of going down that hole, which literally will derail your performance on that day, you watch it go by and you say, oh, there it is again. I'm familiar with that one. What else have you got for me? Or something of that nature. When you look at the heart of a lot of mindfulness practices, that's what they're kind of trying to get you to do. They're trying to get you to see the thoughts coming, to pause in your day somehow, right? It could be, there's a million different mindfulness practices, but what I think the golden nugget is there for the high performance or athletically minded person is setting aside a little bit of time to practice watching the theater of the mind and not latching on to it like it's really 100% dictating what's or 100% reflection of what's going on. So you see the thought, I suck at this. You watch it. Oh yeah, there's that again. Instead of buying into it and going down the emotional, kind of roller coaster ride with it.
Mm-hmm.
So the practical thing is, yeah, actually, a mindfulness practice. There's an absolute boatload of data from fields like mine, experimental psychology, brain imaging. We know about how this affects the brain. We know that if you can dedicate a little bit of time consistently to a practice like that default mode network's rumination capacity gets sort of toned down. And you can actually kind of rewire yourself a little bit, drive a little neuroplasticity to start to make that little voice in your head a little more manageable, right? So that's one thing. I think, the research would say even as little as like 10 to 12 minutes a few times a week, you can reap some benefits if you do that consistently. So we're not talking about a restructuring of your entire life. Most of us can find 10 minutes a few times a week. So I try to get the athletes to do that.
I like that one a lot. And okay, so here's my follow-up to that is, yes, there's the very obvious, like, I suck ones, right? Like those thoughts, we sort of know those are the negative ones. Now, what about the thoughts that are sort of gray area where, okay, for example, like I'm really stressed right now. I'm too busy for this. Like I have a million things to do. So like this is not that you're hearing what's in my brain on some runs lately, but like maybe you're hearing what's in my brain. So it's not necessarily like super negative, but it's negative, but it's not necessarily negative about myself unless it's like I suck, I'm not getting my to-do list done. But that is actually a very real
Oh yeah.
construct. Like that's actually happening in my life. So I can't really argue my way out of it. I can maybe like bop around to like, well, you need the exercise because you like it's gonna like calm you down and make you more productive and all of that kind of stuff. But like, yeah, what do we do when the negative self-talk is actually accurate? Which I feel like just revealed a whole lot about myself that I'm asking that as a follow-up question, but you
Yeah.
know where I'm going with this.
It's getting really personal here. I love it. That's funny. You know, yeah, I don't want to leave anyone the impression that I'm saying it's all just theater and none of it's real and all that stuff, because that's patently false, right? Um, there are thoughts that we have. We live busy lives. We have to attend to these things. Um, one of the things I would say about that, though, Molly, is that most of us are very easy to fall into a what psychologists would call a cognitive fallacy or cognitive distortion, which is the all or nothing kind of thinking. Like, man, athletes, me, I've been down that road a million times, and I see athletes at all levels, from Olympic down to, people who are fitting it in around taking their kids to the soccer pitch or whatever. Falling into this trap because it's kind of an error in our operating system. There are a bunch of these cognitive fallacies, but a big one is all or nothing thinking. Whereas I've got so much on my to-do list that I really can't fit in an hour run today. So I'm just not going to run at all, right? You would be better served by lacing up your shoes and going out for 15 minutes around the neighborhood if that's all you could get in.
Mhm.
Because as you pointed out, and I'll just kind of put this in a little sciencey language, exercise is the most powerful drug that we know of for modulating our neurochemistry in ways that bring down that kind of sympathetic overdrive, those anxious thoughts, that kind of stress kind of way of being, bringing it back down to a state of focus and composure where we can actually be productive getting those things done. And so fitting in the 10 minutes, 15 minutes, whatever you can fit in, and not falling victim to it's got to be an hour or it's not even worth getting dressed for, or whatever your trip might be. And look, I've had all sorts of trips like that. Like, I'm not going to throw my leg over the bike unless I can go for at least an hour because it takes time to get ready and all these things. It's not constructive. It's much better for you all around, and it will serve you better in getting and actually addressing rather than procrastinating those other things, right? A big reason why we procrastinate, whether it's workouts or work or other things we don't want to deal with, a stack of bills, or taxes or whatever, receipts,
Ugh,
is
you're really
all
raising
or
my cortisol levels here,
yeah, I'm
Scott. This is
sorry. I shouldn't be talking about all these things. I should trigger warning.
you're like, I gotta go. Yeah.
Yeah. A big reason we procrastinate is because of all or nothing thinking, right? Got to do it all. Got to sit down and do it till it's done.
Totally.
But that's also a fallacy. It's a distorted way of thinking. It can really cause a lot of stress for us because we can get locked up and just nothing happens, right?
Yeah. Well, and it sounds like it's funny. I was going to ask you next about common pitfalls that people fall into with mental performance training. And I
Oh,
would
this is
actually
a big
say
one.
it's funny because it sounds like the all or nothing thing actually is probably something that like I would very quickly fall into with the
Yeah.
concept of performance training, like mental
Yeah, I
training.
think I think people who gravitate toward endurance sports are pretty driven people for the most part, and often have perfectionistic sorts of tendencies, right? And that those are really great assets, right? They can help drive you very far and cause you to, really dedicate yourself to working day after day to get improvement on something. All great traits, but they can also be your downfall, because when we're too perfectionistic, it can often tie very much in with this all or nothing way of seeing things, right? I've got to do it this way or it's not worth doing. The coach said I need to do, uh, I don't know, 12 by 400 on the track today. Um, and if I don't feel like I can do 12 by 400, I just won't go to the track, right? Or I won't run the race because I'm not in the very best shape I could possibly be in. I'll just wait a little longer. When what would really probably serve your long-term goals and development and probably your joy would be to go do the race.
100%. I love it. I love it. Okay, and just to kind of end this a bit with a bit of goal setting here, as we're thinking about our mental performance, any thoughts on how an athlete can look back and reflect on, say, their past year in sport as we get ready to like look ahead for the future?
Yeah. Can I say one last thing though?
Please.
Because not everybody's going to run out and say, well, Molly and Scott's said it'd be good for me to develop a mindfulness practice of some kind and spend, whatever time. But here's a quick fix if you're not ready to make that leap yet, which
We
is
love a quick
just,
fix.
yeah, quick fix can really help you in a lot of ways, I think. And my athletes, we often have this conversation in the context of sport, but then they're like, wow, this is really helping me in my relationships or my time off the bike or off the track, whatever. And that is to when those thoughts are coming, like you were describing a minute ago, just pause. Just just take a pause. It could be 15 seconds. It might feel like an eternity, but often that pause is enough time to kind of get our wits about us and ask ourselves one question, which is it true? Right? Is it true that I can't fit that 10-minute run in? Is it true that everything is falling apart and sliding off the rails? We gotta pause. And that can it's like hitting the pause on that theater of the mind little thing that's going on, right? And it can often be a very powerful way of just like resetting ourselves and getting out of the moment.
I like that.
If
Now,
it
if you
gets
were,
really bad, oh, go ahead.
I was gonna say, if you were in the middle of like a run or a bike or something, like, would you actually like literally like full on pause, or would you just kind of do more of like a mental, like, okay, pause?
I paused. I mean, I like pulled off to the side of the
I
road,
love
but
that.
like,
No,
all
I was
right,
hoping you would
Scott,
say that. I think that makes a
we
lot of
we got
sense.
to take a few breaths here, right? A few breaths are also very good, lengthening a couple deep breaths with a long exhale, twice as long as the inhale. That also tips us toward that parasympathetic kind of state where we're not so keyed up. And it just takes a few cycles of that to often tone down just a little bit. But the pause is great.
I
So
think,
yeah,
yep,
I'm
I
not
love it.
pulled off this side of the road. I've I've stopped in the middle of interval workouts because I was so in my head that I was really struggling, and I was at the verge of like I'm just done. I'm not doing this today, and then paused, sat there maybe a couple of minutes, right? Had a little drink,
Hmm.
and then restarted it.
Yep. Well, and
And
that little drink just reminded me of, I remember when you were on the first time, we talked about, I think it was just one of those like last minute additions we made at the end of the episode where we're like, also make sure you're not thirsty or hungry because often those two
oh,
things.
huge. No, they're huge. And and think about it, would it be better to just bail on the interval workout, or would it be better to have a little extra pause time if you're
Totally.
looking for training adaptations and for cultivating mental toughness? Because it's just what we've been talking about. That little pause time is just a little bit of stepping back from those vacillations up and down of your mind, letting things calm down, right? That again, that's how I think of mentally tough people. That's the
Hmm.
kind of stuff they do to get them through. Doesn't have to be perfect, but we're getting through this.
Love it. Love it.
So goals. I'm sorry. I just wanted to
Goals.
leave that little tip.
No, I think that is a fantastic one. And yeah, hopefully anyone that their eyes kind of crossed at the idea of mindfulness
Yeah.
and taking 10
Which
minutes.
most people will. Yeah. So,
Like I try, but I completely
yeah.
understand that. Although I'm very excited. We just got a sauna and I feel like it's going
Oh
to
boy.
work my mindfulness so well because you can't bring anything in with you.
Yeah.
So,
Sauna is great for that. And Yeah, it's also good for the kind of riding through difficulties, because if you
Mm,
stay in there for a while, your mind starts getting really like, I need to get out now.
hmm
Cold plunging is amazing for this. We could talk about that some other time, but
Ooh, definitely. Well, obviously, we're going to have you back on again after this, but
we'll talk sauna.
exact. Perfect. Okay. So, yeah, before we wrap up, let's hear your like quick hit on goals because I know every athlete is thinking about it as we head into the new year. How do you approach goals with your athletes?
Yeah, well, I mentioned kind of thinking about their results-based goals and process-based goals, and some folks will say that we shouldn't get into results-based goals, but I'm a believer that most of us need both. So I guess my first message would be don't be put off from the idea of having results-based goals. They're great, but always have process goals that accompany them. So then no matter what happens, there are wins to be had. So I had a skier racing this past weekend on the World Cup. Didn't go quite the way that she hoped it would go. But the question I had for her is, well, what were the wins in your process, right? And
Mm,
so we can all kind of embrace that sort of thing. We can all look at having goals that are results based, but backing them up with some process goals. And a simple way to get at the process goals, I always ask the athletes, what did you learn?
love it. Yeah.
And we'll often debrief with a simple thing of, if you were able to do the race again next weekend, what would you do the same and what would you change? Because that's how we can kind of consolidate that learning.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think I agree with you on the setting both because I think, yes, you might not get all your outcome goals. I've talked about this ad nauseum. Like, I have not gotten all of mine, but having them has definitely got me a lot closer to them than I would have been without them. That's for sure.
Absolutely.
Like,
My other
awesome.
word about, yeah, I know for sure. And my other thing about goals is that it's okay to have an audacious goal that's kind of like, yeah, seems like a crazy goal. Um, those can be really motivating, right? Maybe you don't make it to your audacious goal, but it might just be the magnet that pulls you further than you might have gone otherwise. But make sure that the goals you're setting are things that really matter to you. It doesn't matter that they're things that other people might think are really cool. Like Boston's a great example. Um, you want to run Boston. Well, why do you want to run Boston? Right? Maybe
Yep.
it is like this lifelong goal you've had, and then it's great. Go for it. Do the qualifier, work in getting the time. That's amazing. But if you're doing it just because you think that's what you should do to get the stamp of being a true marathoner, I wouldn't waste my time. I'd find something else that you're excited about doing and go after that.
Hmm
It's important that the goals are exciting. Most of us aren't earning our living doing this, and this should bring you pleasure. And so the goals should be motivating and exciting to you. You should be excited when you write your goals down at the beginning of the year.
Oh, yes. I love it. I love it. Awesome. All right. Before we wrap, tell everyone where they can find you, follow you, potentially work with you. I don't know what your like open to athletes is right now, but give us all the details.
It changes time to time, but I always welcome people to just shoot me an email. I'm happy to meet with people. It's just Scott at cerebralperformance.com. And they can also reach me and check out the content at my website. I try to keep putting new science and brain related things as they pertain to the things we're talking about there. Cerebralperformance.com.
Perfect. And we'll include a link to that in the show notes. Scott, as always, thank you so much. It's always so much fun chatting with you about this stuff.
I love it, Molly, and hopefully there's some actionable things in there as well.
Thanks so much for tuning in to the Consummate Athlete Podcast. If you want to hear more training, racing, and endurance sport advice, make sure you subscribe to the podcast and leave us a rating and review. You can also subscribe to our newsletter at consummateathlete.com for a weekly dose of inspiration and advice straight to your inbox.